Welcome back to another episode of Screen Stories. In this podcast, we'll be discussing the mystery adventure game known as the Somnium Files. This is your host, Clare Rivetti. The Somnium Files is a striking visual novel game that's been described as cerebral and thought-provoking, while still remaining accessible and understandable. We'll first be talking all about our favorite parts of this game, and then you can look forward to a discussion about how this detective drama makes use of multiple timelines and dream investigations. Once again, I have my co-host Sky with me, and we'll be starting off with a bit of background on the game itself. So, Sky, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a good dull evening to be recording with a very good friend. How are you doing?
I'm also doing all right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be introducing this game that you introduced me to.
Yeah, it's true. We're both big fans of the director and writer of the Zero Escape series of visual novels, and he also created this game, and I love it so much. As a fan of visual novels and detective games, and as a psych major who really likes the idea of dreams and all that, this game pleases every part of me, and I'm really glad I can introduce this to you, and now our viewers as well.
Indeed. So, wasting no time, let's get into things. The Somnium Files is set in a near-future Tokyo and follows Special Agent Kaname Date of the top-secret police department, Abyss. The game was directed by Kotaro Uchikoshi, who also developed the Zero Escape visual novel series and was originally released on the PS4, Nintendo Switch, and Steam in 2019. It generally received positive reviews and was actually the 12th best reviewed Nintendo Switch game of its year. Now, those are the basics, but regarding the plot, Sky, what is it we need to know about the Somnium Files?
Well, for those of you guys who are familiar with point-and-click adventure games, you'll already understand the basic fundamentals of the Somnium Files. It's an adventure game where you're playing as a detective in this neo-noir setting. Noir as in you're playing as this, black-coated detective investigating this, darkened, sometimes gloomy Tokyo, but neo in the sense that there's some, near-future tech that paved the way for a lot of really interesting story stuff to happen. The premise of this game is that we are investigating, going door to door, and trying to discover clues that will lead us to the truth of the new Cyclops serial killings. There's a lot of bodies discovered around Tokyo, each one dead with one eye gouged out of the skull. The game starts by opening up into this raining abandoned amusement park where we see the dead body of the lady strapped to a horse on a merry-go-round with an eye gouged out. Throughout the whole game, we're having to go door to door and investigating all the people related and trying to figure out who's responsible, and it leads us on a very crazy journey.
Alrighty, so what kind of characters can we expect from this game?
Well, the daughter of the lady who died is this cute little girl named Mizuki, who Date took in and raises as one of his own, and she's the sixth grader who constantly bickers with him, and they have this really sweet relationship. And we meet with one of her friends named Ota, which is short for otaku, as in this Japanese shut-in dweeb, dork, geek, nerd. He's definitely a character, and we also get to meet his mother, who runs this diner. We get to hang out with this internet idol who runs this YouTube channel. Her name is Iris, and what you guys might find interesting is that in part of the marketing for the Somnium Files, they actually created a real YouTube channel that was run by Iris. It's she was it was a really cool marketing tactic to get people into the game by discovering her actual YouTube videos, especially when they started inserting some hints as to the actual narrative themes of the Somnium Files. It's really neat. At the at the police department Abyss, we also get to meet Boss, who's Date's boss. She's this very cool, in charge, awesome, sexy boss lady, and she's really cool, mysterious, and
suave.
Very suave. Sits on her desk. She's very casual, and she's very, very nice. And there's also Pewter. P as in computer, Pewter. Pewter is the one who develops a lot of the technology that you use on your investigations, like the sync machine and IBA. And I would like to share more about those two, if you don't mind, because those are like the core of this game.
Sure thing.
Well, the main gimmick of this game is that your skill set isn't just limited to going door to door and talking to people and investigating. See, Date has a cybernetic eye, and this eye houses an artificial intelligence named IBA, AIBA. IBA is this, she's pretty snarky, she's got an attitude, she balances out Date's very dorky self really well. Just putting him in his place and stuff, and providing a lot of, level-headed humor to Date's weirdness. Yeah. It's wonderful. But this IBA allows him to zoom in super close, or use X-ray vision, or like thermo camera and whatnot, which helps on the field a lot. But also, Pewter has developed this technology called syncing. So sometimes when you're investigating and you come across a suspect who's not willing to lend you information, or is unconscious, or can't lend you information, or something like that, Date has the ability to sync with them, PSYNC, so it's like psi and sync, you get it, it's a pun. And basically you two like strap into these chairs, and Date is able to, through the machine, go into the suspect's brain and investigate their dreams. In these dreams, you basically try to, uncover, learn how their dream works, and try to navigate through the dream to try to discover some fact, some truth, some clue that could help the investigation. There are these very creative segments, and they're really lovely.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is that everyone's dreams are different. So, when you're trying to uncover information in one person's dream, interacting with things in one certain way may work, but it might not be the same in another dream. You might have completely different rules that you have to go by. So it's this like really innovative and creative way to kind of delve into someone's psyche.
Absolutely. And I know, like, in real life, there's, like, a lot of people who experience dreams differently. I have this one friend who, she's this very assertive, independent kind of woman, and she she says that in her dream, she's able to just, like, jump out of her own body and just go into the bodies of other people in her dreams and, like, just look from their perspective. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like something you'd have the stubbornness to do.
That's amazing.
It's pretty cool. So, like, these Somniums, the Somniums are the dream worlds. They basically allow us to, just kind of get a feel for how different people's brains work. And there's some really fascinating applications of this idea, actually. They don't just squander this, like, as, like, some marketing tactic. They actually use it in really cool ways.
Yeah, so that being said, what kind of Somniums do we get to experience? Do you have any favorites or least favorites, or?
Well, Ota, the shut-in nerd character, is trying to get his light novel published. He kind of takes life like, he's very irresponsible, I would say. His mom, on the other hand, Mayumi is this kindly, sweet lady who manages this diner. It's like, oh, she's like the one helping him out and supporting him and whatnot. But it's weird because this diner has no guests coming to it. In fact, she says, hey, you gotta leave now. I'm gonna, the dinner rush is coming soon. But this diner is right on the outskirts of a nuclear plant explosion that went off a while ago. or a radiation plant explosion that went off. So, like, you know, people don't come around there anymore. And the sad truth is that you realize she suffers from dementia. And it's actually, like, really sad. It brings about this moment where, like, Date, like, you know, doesn't really, like, it's this really unique scenario where it's like, do I, like, tell her the truth, or should I let her live in her idyllic fantasy where, you know, she's still with her husband who passed away and they're still getting customers and she's still, like, you know, nothing's changed between her and her son. Mm-hmm. But then eventually Date needs to sync with her in order to gather information about the case. And when you jump into her dream, it takes place in the diner. So, you know, a lot of our dreams take place in places that we're familiar with, or like they're like a conglomeration of different settings we identify with. Of course, Mayumi's Somnium is the diner, but it's this like very serene sunset with this acoustic guitar track playing in the background. And most importantly, it's fragmented in a sense. You can only a fifth of the diner actually exists, and the rest is just like an empty landscape. So what you're trying to do is, within Mayumi's dream, you're trying to interact with different objects that you think might trigger her memories of, like, trigger some fond memories for her. And in doing so, you will reveal more and more of the diner and bring it back to her attention. And there's this clock in the diner that, like, turns forward the more you do this. Like, she's starting to, like, come back to, like, you know, what's going on and stuff like that. It's this really fascinating Somnium segment that really characterizes Mayumi and, like, you know, like all the stuff, difficulties of raising a child, especially with, you know, her husband and the diner difficulties and whatnot. They don't have money, all that. But, like, she's struggling with even remembering the good times, and it's really sad. And when you eventually fix the whole diner, you have the choice to either turn the clock forward or back. And what you're supposed to do is turn the clock backwards, and it reminds her of this old time back when her father and her son wanted to apologize to her for giving, like, you know, for, I don't know, taking her for granted, and they gave her this really lovely gift, and it made her really happy.
I think you mean husband, by the way.
Oh, what did I say? Father? Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
I meant husband. And even though, like, out of this Somnium, you don't actually gather really significant information regarding the serial killing case, but in these stories, especially anime-style stories, character-centric anime-style stories, when you grow close to this ensemble of characters, having each character reach strong closure and just having their whole personal emotional arc concluded is sometimes even more satisfying than just uncovering the central mystery. And for that reason, I think this Somnium really meant a lot to me. As someone who, you know, I'm a single child and I'm with my mom, and, you know, I think this is just a really big, it kind of meant a lot to me. Just this being able to help Mayumi and her son Ota finally kind of make amends. It was really sweet, really touching.
Yeah, touching is the word I was going to use. Yeah. I think, that is a really nice aspect of it because, like you said, even though it's not huge for your investigation, it still gives you this emotional part of the game and part of Mayumi in particular, and it kind of ties that together. And what they did with Mayumi's Somnium was really cool because it was just a really interesting way to visualize what was going on in her brain. Not just the fact that it was a dream, but how her dementia affected the space and stuff. Seeing that was really, really interesting. And I think another example of that happening would be one of my favorite Somniums, which is Iris's Somnium. So Iris, like you mentioned earlier, is this YouTuber chick, and she does Let's Plays. She streams herself gaming.
Especially her favorite game, Minecraft. Oh, sorry. I meant Shovel Forge, not Minecraft.
Right. So she does play a bunch of Minecraft, but in this world, copyright and stuff, they call it Shovel Forge.
Shovel Forge.
Which, first of all, is incredible. It's an incredible name, and I think it's hilarious.
It's great.
But then, in her actual Somnium, she is streaming currently, and the game that she is streaming is Shovel Forge, and you're her avatar walking through the world of Shovel Forge and interacting with things. So basically, you're in Minecraft. So everything is like blocky, and you're walking around with this little avatar, and I don't even play Minecraft, but the fact that it was like so cute and such a funny reference, it was just really fun to go through.
It's really cool because you're walking through and everything's blocky, and the music so far in this game is this track that while you're going through Iris' Somnium is all chiptune and stuff like that, and it's really cute. And you're just trying to go through and everything's blocky, but then these big monitors up across the Somnium are just Iris live streaming, and it's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing that kind of ties into what Mayumi experiences in her dream is the fact that Iris actually has a brain tumor, and it affects her in a certain way so that she has delusions. And in her Somnium, you can decide to either go along with what she's kind of pointing you towards finding out in her dream. You can go along with the path she's kind of laying out for you, or you can resist that and do the opposite of what she's wanting you to do, and that kind of breaks the delusions. But when you're following along with what she wants from you, you come to this conclusion that these people are out to get her, that they're after her, and what it is it's actually just her delusion because of the tumor.
Yeah, in the game, you guys, you're trying to protect Iris from this sort of mysterious secret society, and Iris is telling you who they are and why they want her. And Date doesn't really believe her. Iris, or Aiba especially, doesn't believe her. But Iris says, sync with me. I'll prove to you that they're real. And you see them because they are real to her. And if you keep playing the game and doing what she says, then, Date believes her. But you as a player need to find a way to break the game and, get off of the beaten path that she's paved for you, and all of a sudden everything isn't blocky anymore, and you see an actual a full-bodied Iris looking real, and it's hey, this isn't, you're making this up, this isn't real, and it's a crazy moment.
Yeah, that is definitely up there for one of my favorite Somniums, and I think it's another great example of how the Somniums visualize the mental state of the subject, as you will.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, I think that's a good place to leave it off, so we'll be right back with more screen stories after this quick break. It generally received positive reviews and was actually the 12th best reviewed Nintendo Switch game of its year. Bless you.
Don't cut out my sneeze, leave it in.
No, I won't. Then I'll look like an asshole.
No, I'll look like the asshole for sneezing over your line.
No, you won't. Pats you. Now that we've established the narrative elements of the game, we're going to talk about how they're applied to the gameplay. Conventional detective games typically involve interrogating witnesses, going door to door, inspecting crime scenes, things of that nature. With Date's enhanced technological arsenal of abilities, he can perceive things that your average detective couldn't. His technological eye, weapon, and dream machine not only enhances the narrative of the game, but also diversifies the player's opportunities. Can you tell us more about the gameplay of the Somniums? How is investigating inside a dream different from a normal investigation?
So, I'm glad that we got the opportunity to talk about all of Date's technology, because I feel like that's the biggest narrative thing that separates this game from your classic detective story. It really amplifies just not only just how fun it is to do the little things, like just talking to people and looking around and inspecting a crime scene, but it's just really interesting going through the Somniums, because obviously investigating inside a dream is pretty crazy. So like basically how they're structured like escape rooms. So if you've ever been in an escape room, you're locked inside this room for a limited period of time, and you're trying to find clues and open locks and just trying to find your way out from the inside. And that's how the Somniums are treated. You're in this area and you're trying to find ways to progress, but you're trying to figure out what the rules the person's brain obeys and like how to make progress. But the catch is the player has the opportunity to make many different decisions in these dreams. There's no one right answer, leading to different revelations uncovered that can radically change the direction of the story. So for instance, the very first Somnium in the game, you are Mizuki, who's the girl that Date takes care of. Mizuki was actually at the scene where the dead body attached to the merry-go-round was found, and she, when you found her, she had aphonia. She was mute, and you think, like, okay, we can't get any information out of her, but we can sink inside her head. So what we end up doing is like we can do many different things in there, but there are two major outcomes, and one of them is that we heal her because we managed to play this song, or we managed to play the sound of Mizuki's mother saying she loves her and she cares very deeply for her and stuff like that, and that mentally cures her. But in a different set of circumstances, those will result in Mizuki's mother like telling her like, oh, how disappointed she is in her, and her abusing Mizuki, and you'll actually unveil some really traumatic memories for Mizuki. So obviously what ends up happening is either she's able to talk and she's able to give you more information, or she's not, and you've reached a dead end and you need to pursue a different tack. So the little decisions that you make in these Somniums completely change how the story goes. There is no one linear story. And I feel like it's really important to establish the fact that unlike your traditional detective movie or TV show, or unlike Ace Attorney, the video game where we talked about in the first podcast, this is more like Netflix's Bandersnatch, where it's a choose your own adventure, kind of. You'll get exclusive information in each path that you take in the story, due to certain circumstances as a result of what you found out from their dream. It's really interesting, and what ends up happening is that there's so many different choices that you can make that end up with all these branches. And if the character wants to go back and learn, or if you want to go back and learn more about different characters, the branching storylines really accommodate that. If you want to go back and learn more about someone else, or like, okay, I think I've gotten enough of this person, I need to know more about this different side of the case. Well, I feel like the Somnium Files really capitalizes on the premise of an interactive story, and like, solving a serial killing through an interactive medium like a video game by letting you, choose where you want, what side of this case you want to pursue, and, getting completely different information as a result. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think something that you said earlier when you were giving Mizuki Somnium as an example, there are two choices, like you said, and it results in her either remaining mute or being able to speak again. But in the timeline where she remains mute, things don't just end. You still go through your investigation and continue on from that point on. It's just different, and there's different things you learn because things have changed as a result of her still being mute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just really interesting. I'm glad you brought up the word timeline. That might be like, oh, that's a pretty big word for just a down-to-earth detective story, but it's actually not. So gamers are pretty familiar with the idea of reloading your save state to make a different decision, like save your file, and then if you make a wrong choice, just go back and load your file. Well, in Kotaro Uchikoshi's mystery games, he often uses a flowchart that documents the entire timeline of events the player has taken. And this allows you to jump to a very specific point in the timeline in the series of events that you've taken and make a different decision. And this is especially significant in a serial killer investigation where some decisions might lead to more people being murdered, but as a result of more going on, there will be more clues laid out to extract information from. It also allows for a really satisfying conclusion when the player uses the accumulated information and thwarts the killings in a timeline where few clues have been laid out, but the player knows who he is. So it's really cool because it's like, even though there's information that is exclusive to different timelines, it actually, when you look at this flowchart, the whole flowchart of events that you have chosen, well, there might be like, a mystery in this timeline, but there might be the answer to that mystery in another timeline. And all of a sudden, this game just becomes insane because it's like, it seems pretty straightforward at first, but once you finish, like one series of events, it's like, okay, well, I understand some clues and now I actually understand what's going on in this other timeline. So you, the player, can, just do that and like figure more out. And you're trying to really, I like the idea of, untangling this web, just like, untangling a criminal's web. It's really cool.
So I think something that I want to ask before we get further in this discussion is, since this flowchart and since these timelines all branch from the choices you make in the Somniums, do the outcomes of each choice have ramifications outside of simply changing the path that Date takes in his investigation? Yeah,
they really do. So, taking the example from earlier about being able to thwart the killings in a timeline where not many clues have been laid out. Well, there's one timeline where the serial killer that you're trying to identify and capture actually wins. Like, he just kills more and more people, and you lose really badly. A lot of clues have been laid out by the end, but it's too late. You've lost. So, but using all that information, you, the player, need to, choose different decisions, go back in the flowchart and go to a timeline where the killer hasn't gotten away with that much. And okay, how did the killer manage to get these people into a trap that allowed him to kill them? And you grow closer to those people and convince them to do other things, and that eventually thwarts the killings. And it's really cool because eventually it turns into a standoff between Date and the killer. And mysteriously, Date all of a sudden riffs off all of that accumulated information that the player knows.
Which is like, wait, what?
What on earth? Because Date, he's mortal. He's a dude. We're the omniscient one, the player. We're above the game. We know, we're aware of all the different timelines. The characters in the game shouldn't be.
And yet,
Date is. And it is a crazy moment near the ending of the game where, it's this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's this very meta moment where all of a sudden, Date is just aware of everything, and it's like he remembers all the timelines, and he knows exactly who this person is and how this came about. And it is just an incredible moment.
Yeah, it's very satisfying, although it is a huge surprise and kind of comes without you expecting it, because as you said, we're the player, we're the omniscient one. We have been jumping through all these timelines, and Date to us has just been this character who's just been in these different scenarios. He is one of the cast, but all of a sudden Date is ramping out all this information, and we realize he's kind of in the same boat as us in that he knows this information from all these different timelines when he absolutely shouldn't. And it takes you aback, but not in a bad way. It's very like, what?
Yeah.
Hello, Date.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy, and they don't fully explain like why exactly he's able to do this, but it doesn't really matter. As weird as that sounds to say, it doesn't really matter in the end stages of the game. It's more of just
It's not important.
Yeah, as crazy as it sounds. It's just a very satisfying moment that kind of builds a connection between the player and Date as you've been jumping through all these different timelines and whatnot. That connection is really lovely.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, you know, just on the topic of like jumping between all those different timelines to get to know all those different people, the cast of this game, exudes this certain trait that I think is imperative in any detective story. Rather than featuring just this giant ensemble of characters, and it's like, oh, any one of them could have done it, and they're all kind of like loosely related to what actually happened, it's always much more engaging to create a very small but disparate and recognizable cast of characters that are all tightly woven in this web that you investigate. That's always much more interesting when, like, you know, you have like 8 or so people who are like all very intricately related to or involved in the going-ons in this story. And it also, you know, like it creates like just this very close cast for you to, you know, not only prove their innocence or guilt, depending, but also just to get closer to and understand their inner struggles. And it's really nice because of one of the narrative themes of the game. I know you know.
Oh, yes. I wanted to mention, so this whole time we've been telling you the title of the game, which is I, the Somnium Files. I is actually spelled AI, and the meaning of it in Japanese is love. So it has the meaning of, it sounds like I in English.
As in an eyeball. Yeah.
Yeah, the eyeball. It's the beginning of Aiba's name, who is your partner, Aiba, and it means love. And it's it has to do with different expressions of love.
Yeah, and as Date grows closer to all those different characters, we reconnect. We grow to appreciate this relationship between, you know, the vibrant YouTuber net idol Iris and her very calm and motherly mom, who's very down to earth by contrast, but we love them both. We reconnect the careless young otaku with his mom that struggles with dementia in this really heart-touching moment. And we grow to appreciate this really dynamic relationship between the fan favorites of this game, Mizuki and Date. So, like, Mizuki is, like, you know, the daughter of the woman who died, and, like, she was this abusive mom, and her dad didn't really have time for her, and Mizuki got taken in by Date, and it's this really cute dynamic. It's the sort of father-daughter, but not by blood dynamic. And you can tell that Date is just like flying on the seat of his pants when it comes to the whole taking care of someone else thing, because he can't even take care of himself. His whole wardrobe is just the same coat. So, and it's hilarious because this 6th grader is so, oh my god, she has a backbone. She is tough, and Date just like, they just backtalk each other, they just bicker, they have so much sass with each other, just stupid old man, punk ass kid, like, it is hilarious.
Yeah, like 99% of their interactions are literally just full out arguing or bickering, as you put it. So that's why, like, you know, at the beginning you might not expect such a deep relationship between the two of them. You know, it could easily be taken as they just kind of live with each other because they have to, and like they argue all the time, so they're just, they just put up with each other is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, you can easily make that assumption. But then as you go through the game and you get to a certain point, Date actually has been hospitalized, and Mizuki needs to sync with Date.
You play as Mizuki.
Yeah, so now all of a sudden you're playing as Mizuki going into Date's Somnium, and it's this nice little reversal thing. And do you want to describe some of the stuff that happens in there?
Like, yeah, Mizuki's Somnium, Mizuki sinking into Date's Somnium. It takes place in Date's home, their home that they share, and I love this part of the game. This might be my favorite part of the whole game. Basically, like, it's this moment where, like, Date just saved Mizuki's life, but he's on the brink of death, and you're having to go in there to psychologically heal him. And what ends up happening is Mizuki, in going through Date's dreams, she kind of realizes just how much Date truly loves her. And Mizuki truly loves Date too. But in going through this dream, you uncover not only, like, a lot of moments between Mizuki and Date, moments that they shared together, a lot of bickering, but some tender moments in there that show Date's inner thoughts throughout all of it. But also, there's this moment at the very end where, like, after Mizuki truly, it really hits her just how much she's losing if Date wasn't with her. It comes to this final, like, all of a sudden everything's dark and there's two spotlights, and one shines on her mom and dad and one shines on Date, and the game has you as the player pick where her true feelings lie, and obviously it's Date. You gotta pick Date.
Why would you pick her parents?
Yeah, mom sucks and dad's too busy. So you go over to Date, and he pushes Mizuki away, saying, like, you need to go be with your parents. I'm not what you need, but you need to keep going into him, keep running into him. Like, it needs to be you. And it's this really tender moment that really I loved, because Mizuki kind of embodies this one anime trope called the tsundere, which means this one character who, like, is very aggressive and hardy and kind of really curt and misanthropic and very cold and blunt. But, like, deep down inside, they're really sweet, and, like, a lot of the anime is about defrosting the Ice Queen and just kind of, getting her to turn into someone soft.
She's a hedgehog.
Or a durian. But what I love about this is, like a lot of the times this trope doesn't exactly work for me, because it's hard for me to sympathize with someone who's being so rude to my face.
Right.
But, like, it's different. This game uses the Somniums as a really clever narrative tool to basically tell you, like, hey, you've seen how they are externally, but let me show you that how Mizuki and Date interact with each other externally is completely different and independent from their feelings about each other internally. There is no conflict or dislike in each other internally, and you're going through Date's dream and you really realize, like, how much Date, how much of a safe place Date truly wanted to make for Mizuki, and earlier in the game, how much he cares. And
because, like, 99% of his Somnium is to do with Mizuki. Like, yeah, pretty much everything is to do with Mizuki in his dream.
It's crazy. And, like, there's this one part earlier in the game where Mizuki and Date went to go pray at a shrine, and she's like, what did you pray for? To get the hell out of here as fast as possible. But when you're in his brain, you can see what he actually prayed for, which is that Mizuki grows up healthy and happy and safe, and Mizuki starts crying. And it's like, oh my god. So it's this really clever psychological narrative tactic saying, like, hey, we're going to show you that how they truly feel for each other is different from, all their aggression on the outside, especially, like, even, like, right after Date wakes up, after Mizuki heals him,
Oh, right after he wakes up, they're right back at it. Like, literally, the first thing she does is she jumps in the air and she's about to punch him in the face. Like, he's just gotten out of, like, maybe almost dying, and she just straight up goes for it. First thing she does after that really emotional moment.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people would go like, okay, that's freaking stupid. You just saved his life. Why would you do that? But, like, it's kind of this really nice moment where you understand, like, their relationship and you know that there's, like, a lot of, like, yo, you're so stupid. I wanted to punch you because I didn't want to lose you. And it's actually this tender moment of, like, I understand how close you two are now. I understand that all the bickering is just, like, you know, surface level stuff. And I know that, like, truly deep down, like, you guys really care for each other. And even though in this timeline, like, you don't truly solve the Cyclops serial killings, you kind of, the player actually kind of achieves an even more emotionally satisfying ending by just, you know, being able to finally get this really close bond between Mizuki and Date out in the open, which is, it's impressive and it's really cool.
Yeah, so, like, there's just so many different aspects, and, you know, all the different timelines tie into either learning more about the cases or learning more about the characters, and I think that's especially where you can feel the love. And of course the game manages to tie it all together at the end, but it's really nice because everything that you learn in each timeline kind of lends itself back to the other timeline. Like when someone dies in one timeline, even though you know it's not necessarily permanent, you feel for them because you got closer to them in the other timeline.
Yeah.
And it's just this like loop that keeps going, and it's just really it's really well done, and it's really worth like exploring.
It is. And I guess if I wanted to share one other cool story writing thing regarding the whole multiple timelines idea, I just love the idea that you know, in a linear story you can't get away with just randomly killing characters off just for the shock factor, or just to, like, you know, just because like, you know, whether or not the death would have some value, it's like, okay, well, if you're just going to kill off your whole ensemble of characters, who's left to fight for?
Right.
But, like, in this game with multiple timelines, it allows for something that you will not see in a linear story, which is you'll do a series of events that will result in, like, one character, like, shooting another character and killing them. And maybe that timeline of events, like, ends, like, right around there because, like, you know, like, well, I don't know. For some reason or another, we can't solve the Cyclops serial killings. But you know that is a fact that happened, that this person was hostile towards this person enough to want to kill them. So we are given that information and we saw it happen, but the long-term ramifications don't exist. It's just we're given that information, we're given the shock factor of it, and we're then able to use it in a different timeline where they're still alive to be able to, you know, understand what's really going on. That's something you cannot pull off in a linear game. And because of that, like, this game features a lot of really crazy shock moments that just give you more, like, moments of what the heck is even happening, you know? The game can offer those moments without any long-term ramifications, so that when you get to the end game twists, which I promise you will not see coming, it is very satisfying, because it's like all of these crazy, weird one-off moments all of a sudden make sense in this crystallizing ending.
Yeah, I think the way you put that was perfect. Alrighty, so is there anything else that we want to say?
I just want to say that this game, as a point-and-click adventure, or as a detective game, or as a visual novel, it's a pretty recent game, and with all of its quality of life improvements over games of its kind, and with all of the wonderful storytelling techniques that the game uses, and the wonderful 3D anime art style of the game, it is a very, very worthwhile experience, and honestly, as a standalone experience, if anyone had to ask me, like, if there was one visual novel game that you had to pick up, one detective game that you had to pick up just on its own, my instant first recommendation would be The Somnium Files.
Yeah. I also just want to point out that throughout all of this podcast, we did not, in fact, mention the answer to the big question, which is, who is the new Cyclops serial killer? So,
dun dun dun.
So, if you are interested in the game, you still got a few tidbits and nuggets to grab from it that we did not mention.
Lots of surprises, lots of big and small surprises that'll keep you engaged from beginning to end, we promise you.
And that's our guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
We really hope that you guys enjoyed this podcast on The Somnium Files. If you'd like to try the game out for yourself, it's now available on all major platforms, and for those of you interested, there is a sequel starring Mizuki herself, set to release in spring 2022. I've been your host, researcher, and editor, Clare Rivetti, and I want to thank Sky here for joining me on this podcast. We hope you tune in next time on Screen Stories.